Hi, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, Presbyterian minister of 3 congregations in Eastern Ontario, and thank you for joining this week's Puzzles in Faith. The question this week is more of a topic. It's what is that relationship between science and religion? Do you have to believe, as a religious person, as a Christian, do you have to believe in creationism? And do you have to reject evolution? And so that's what we're going to look at this week, very quickly, skimming the surface. For many of us, there's no conflict. Science and religion are asking, we might say the same phrases, but we're really asking 2 very different questions. So why does the world exist? If you're approaching it from a scientific perspective, you're going to be looking at astronomical records, geological records. You're going to talk about processes, chemical interactions, all sorts of things like that. And you're probably going to trace it back to the Big Bang. Why do we exist? We can give you how. We can give you what happened along the way. On the religious side, when you say, why do we exist? It's simple. It's God. And God wanted it. So we'll talk about who and the purpose, the why. Science can never answer who or even the purpose. It can't figure out the purpose. It can only deal with the processes. Okay, let me put that a different way for you. Imagine you hear a teapot, a tea kettle whistling. And you might ask, why is the tea kettle whistling? Or why is the water hot? Science can tell you the mechanics of either you've plugged the kettle in, there's electrical currents, the temperature gets up to 212 Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, and that's the boiling point for water, and that's why the water's boiling, and that's why talk about how it triggers the kettle to whistle. That's the why that science answers. But there's another way of looking at it. Why is the water boiling? Why is the kettle whistling? Because I wanted a cup of tea. Simple. I don't care about the mechanics. I wanted a cup of tea, so I plugged the kettle in or put it on the stove, whatever. That's the kind of things that happen. Religion will be looking at who and the purpose. I plugged it in, I wanted tea. Science will be looking at the mechanics, the math, the logic behind it. When we take a look at creation and evolution, and evolution gets lumped on quite a few layers. Today, we're just going to be looking at sort of how old is the earth, and was the world created in 6 days or not? And some people, some Christians, say, yes, there is a definite conflict here because science says that the world is millions and possibly billions of years old, and the Bible says that God created it in 6 days. Other Christians will say, wait a second, that doesn't really matter. The Bible is not to be taken literally in everything. So we'll have Christians fighting Christians. One passage that we like to talk about in just a second is from 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8, where it says that one day is like 1,000 years. And so some people say, wait a second, maybe when the Bible is talking about on the first day God did this, or on the second day God did that, maybe they're not talking about 24-hour periods. Maybe they're talking about a period that could be 1,000,000 years in length. And that's certainly possible. Now, creationists will say no, because the word use is day and means day, and generally doesn't mean something else. Others will argue, we debate. But one question I have for you: how do we know how long a day was? Well, we measure a day by the rotation of the earth. And we know basically that it's 24 hours. And we can recognize one day is different from the other by the sun rising and setting. And now we have a problem, because in Genesis 1, the sun, S-U-N, is not created until the fourth day. So how long were the first 3 days? Do we have any idea? And the answer is probably no. And that may be the fact that the sun was created on day 4 and not day 1 may be a way that the biblical author was saying God is the source of life. What do I mean? Many religions have a sun god. Greek mythology had a couple of sun gods. Hyperion, I think, was one, and Apollo. We had sky gods too, like Zeus. Norse had Odin and Thor. And so you had an indigenous people often have a sun god, and the sun god creates life in many cultures. But in the Bible, life begins before the sun is created. In other words, having the sun created on day 4, but trees and plants on day 3 is a way of saying the sun, S-U-N, is not responsible for life. God is. God is the source of everything. In other words, Genesis 1 can be read, sort of literally, as many creationists do, but it can also be read theologically, as many Christians do, in that it's pointing to God as the source of all life. And in a very maybe ironic way, saying, ha ha ha, my God's bigger than your God. My God set everything in motion. Your God was created on day 4. So you can sort of see there's possibly a bit of humor in that as well. So don't think that just because you're Christian, you have to stop believing in science or you have to reject science. Don't believe that. That's not true. There are Christians who believe in creationism, that the world was created in 6 days, literal 24-hour days. There are Christians who believe that the world was created over millions of years. Where we agree is that God is the source of all creation and of all life. So that's your introduction to a very complex topic. Once again, I'm the Reverend Dr. Cheryl Gaver, and thank you for joining us for this week's Puzzles and Faith. See you next week. Take care, and God bless.